Good afternoon, everyone, and a very warm welcome you to all. I am Mika Upadhyay, your host for today's session, brought to you by GeneCube, a platform dedicated to empowering startup through innovation, mentorship, and collaboration. Today, we are diving into a topic that every founders eventually faces: building your startup maturity and exit strategy. From the early idea stage to scaling sustainably, every startup goes through multiple growth phases. But very few plan ahead for what comes next. Understanding how to transform a growing startup to mature business and eventually designing the right exit strategy is what separates a good founder from a visionary one. To guide us through this journey, we are joined Mr. Gulshan Rohilla, sir, a startup ecosystem enabler, mentor, and investment expert. Mr. Rohilla brings with him over 18 years of experience, including 9 years leading impactful projects in training and skill development, entrepreneurship, rural development, sustainable livelihoods, strategic partnership, fundraising, and youth engagement. We are truly delighted to have him here to share his expertise on how founders can navigating startup maturity, scale with purpose, and plan successful exit that maximize value. Without further ado, let's welcome Mr. Gulshan Rohilla, sir. Welcome, sir.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Namaskar to everyone. And it was a really long introduction of mine, but that's fine. Okay. So welcome all of you, all my startup buddies. So in fact, this particular topic is very close to my heart. And in fact, establishing a startup also takes a lot of efforts. But building your startup, as the discussion of today is, building your startup's maturity and the exit uh, is actually a Herculean task for every startup founder. So I would just like to start with a simple quote that great founders of the startups don't just build startups, right? So they actually build legacies, and that last beyond their exit. So remember one thing, that you're not building a startup, you're actually building legacies, right? So welcome everyone to this lovely, wonderful, session uh, about nurturing your startup and getting it to the maturity, and then talking about the exit strategy, right? So Megha, can we go to the second slide, please?
Yeah, sure.
So here we'll be talking about startups, basically the entire, in a brief, basically entire life cycle of a startup. So from if I talk about the stages of the startup, and like what kind of different stages we actually go through. Typically, if I talk about the startups, these are several, almost 7 phases which we have actually defined. It will be visible on the slide also after some time. 7 phases, and then we'll be talking about how the product fit stage comes, and then post that we come down to the acquisition part and MVP part, and then we go for the growth, and then the scope goes the scope goes up, and then you go to the maturity phase, and then we'll talk about the exit fund. So talking about the different stages of the startup, as you can see over there, we start with, these are the vital stages. If you're talking, if I actually give it in a nutshell, they are the basic main important stages for you people to understand, and you need to also focus on each and every stage, because every stage carries a lot of value and a lot of efforts we put in. So if I talk about the first stage, ideation stage, and then we go towards the validation, the market validation and the product validation part. Then we go towards the MVP. MVP is basically minimum viable product. And then we go for a PMF. PMF is basically product market fit. Like you actually develop a product which is fitting to the market post validation of the product, and then you realize that this is the actual key for me to grow. So and then you actually move towards the growth stage, and after that you actually post that growth stage, you have realized you've probably done a lot of expansion, you actually acquired, or probably you might have sold out a lot of stuff, and then you come down to the maturity stage. Post that we come to the exit stage. This is a very simple understanding, but if one thing we should always remember, that in the growth stage, uh, this focus rapidly shifts, right? The rapidly shifts from the beginning. If I say from validation towards to the growth stage, the focus shifts from developing your product, and then gradually rapidly shifting towards customer acquisition, and then post that to profitability all of a sudden. And then you realize that you have to talk about cost optimization, and then probably you have to strengthen the entire the market share which you have. And you might have everyone must be aware of what TAM, SAM, and the other achievable market share is. So the focus automatically shifts towards market expansion and achieving the market share. So can we go to the next slide, please? Yeah. Now, talking about maturity, if I say in simple word, maturity means you have actually seasoned into the business. You have actually grown to that level of maturity of a startup. So if I actually put it in a simple phase, that it is a very critical phase, maturity, where the startups they get stabilized, and they have actually stabilized their revenue and operations. And now the focus, in the beginning, the focus was basically more on survival, right? And now the focus has been shifted from survival at any cost kind of thing towards optimizing profits and the efficiency of the operations, like it be it if you talk about service or production or manufacturing or something of that sort. So your focus from surviving in the market shifts towards sustaining in the market, and actually uh, creating the operations to that level that the resource optimization and these kind of, probably all your HR operations, manufacturing, production, sales, finance, every entire system has to be optimized. So, like for example, if I cite an example of like the food delivery business, like Swiggy and Zomato, for example. So these companies, they have actually showcased maturity at this point of time by developing that kind of brand which is very strong enough in the market to sustain, and they have actually created a big what is called customer loyalty and customer base, and this particular market share has been expanded. Like if you can actually compare Swiggy and Zomato, it's quite difficult to define that who's the actual market leader. So the customer loyalty is so strong for these people, and they have grown to that level that they know the cash flow is quite predictable right now for them, right? So this is a kind of optimization they have achieved at the maturity stage. So now uh, the organizational structure of these organizations, these kind of startups which on the maturity stage, they actually become more defined. The entire structure, organizational structure, becomes more defined, and in fact, the processes are very clear. They know what is actually required for them, what is not required for them, and the clarity comes over here. So they are able to understand the how to optimize the resources which they have, plus everything that is supporting them to scale up. Now, this particular phase, in fact, also supports and, in fact, motivates them, the startup founders, you guys, to shift the focus, your mindset, basically, from short term survival goals to long term goals, right? Long term in the sense sustainability, for example, sustaining in the market, leading the competition, or probably being in the top three or top two. That is the goal, which the mindset completely shifts from that phase. So, can you go to the next slide, please? Yes. So talking about strategic goals during maturity. So if I talk about strategic goals during maturity, uh, for example, if I say um, at that point of time, you start to explore new revenue streams, different explore revenue streams that will be explored. For example, if I take an example of Flipkart and launching Paytm, phone pay as a kind of payment gateway platform, and then or Amazon, which is adding more services to them, like AWS services and other services. And if I talk about this particular stage, the strategic goals is like keep on developing and innovating your entire concept. And constant innovation at this point of time is very critical, because you have to stay competitive, and you have to be in the market, be they being the leadership position or the top three. Why I'm talking about top three? Because every field right now we have actually seen, like for example, Flipkart, Amazon, ONDC even catching up, and if you see Swiggy, Zomato, Blinkit, quick commerce platforms. So they actually they're constantly they're trying to innovate every time now and then. So over here also remember one thing: the most important factor would be strategizing your revenue optimization. And in fact, you have explored new revenue streams. You have actually increased and improved your ROI, the return on investment, which you've actually been doing so far till now. And then this is going to strengthen your valuation. And then post that, your sustainability will affect. And these all entire thing which I said right now would actually be a long term goal. As I said, shifting your focus from short term survival goals to long term sustainability, right? So can we go to the next slide, please? Okay, talking about measuring success, key metrics. It's very simple. Just try to understand that if I talk about measuring metrics, more would be into the financial part, right? As you can actually see in the slide, we're talking about EBITDA and net profit margin assessing profitability across the entire globe. So the most important factor would be over here is assessing your metrics, basically more on the cost side plus your revenue stream side, your income and expenditure wise. So over here basically there is something called CAC, as we have mentioned over here, customer acquisition cost basically, and to the lifetime value. There's a proportion, there's a ratio between that, which has to be, like for example Zomato did before IPO. So this is what we are actually trying to talk about. And if I talk about the churn rate, the first of all, if I would like to talk about the retention as well as the churn rate measures, which we actually talk about, and the retention would also directly relate to the customer loyalty. And if the way we have actually attained the customers, we have acquired the customers, plus we have actually retained the customers in our kitty. So plus the market expansion rate, how we are actually trying to how we are trying to expand the market rate with the support of, just a second, just give me 1 second please. Yeah, apologies. Right, I'm back. So yeah, like, can we go to the next slide please? Yeah, common maturity challenges. Okay, so if we talk about common maturity challenges over here, there are challenges like, for example, saturation, growth saturation. In fact, in the initial phase, in the validation and the ideation stage and validation stage, and then the MVP and then the PMF stage, you actually did a lot of rapid expansion in the beginning. So when I talk about rapid expansion, we talk about growing faster from the from the seed stage to the growth stage. Now if I talk about uh, uh, an example in the Indian e-commerce industry, probably you can see Flipkart, Amazon and ONDC. They are actually, they have done a lot of rapid expansion in the market. So talking about bureaucracy, uh, the biggest challenge over here again would be like bureaucracy because of the slow decision making processes. I shouldn't be naming anything on that, but the slow decision making processes actually affects a lot to the startup founders. And this particular speed will be reducing the most complex decision making processes of the startups because of the external factors. So, and if I talk about the leadership fatigue and talent churn, yes, that is one uh, uh, very big challenge which we are talking about. So for example, let's take the example of Ola. They actually faced a lot of challenges for retaining the top management of the organization in expansion phase. So that was one big challenge they faced. And then talking about increased competition and pitching pricing pressure. Okay, so obviously yes, because there is a price competition in the market. If you might have recently seen that Zepto in the quick commerce industry, Zepto has reduced almost the delivery charges, the surcharges, the convenience fees has become zero. So this particular pricing strategy has become very competitive in the market, and this is becoming creating a lot of pressure. We need to be very sure about this, that this should not be affecting our profit margins or profitability in any ways. So this is a very strong method, strong approach towards customer acquisition and retention. True, no doubt on that. But to a certain limit, to a certain period, and post that it will be automatically hampering the profitability to your startup. So um, probably yes. In fact, losing agility due to organizational complexity, as we've already discussed about that. Yes, going to the next slide, please. That's very important. Staying competitive, maintaining momentum. If I talk about maintaining momentum, yes. So, uh, if I talk about, for example, Flipkart. So Flipkart, they have expanded. Like I mean, if I talk about Flipkart, they were very limited to only reviews of the books. Probably it's more related to books, and then they gradually expanded into payments, into airline ticketing, into logistics, into gateways, into, and another thing, they have also started up the e-card logistics. You might have heard. So they have expanded the market. In fact, they are actually trying to cater to the competition in the market. And this particular maturity stage, they are right now in the maturity stage. And then to stay competitive, they have to keep on, as I said, constant innovation is there. So this product diversification comes in picture. So the offerings over here would not be limited to that. So, and talking about uh, geographies, market expansion, if I talk about, see, like for example, Oyo initially started with very small limited geography. Now you can actually see that Oyo is present in almost a lot of countries, and this is the way they've actually aggressively expanded, and to other countries globally, in fact, not only India, globally. So yes, then talking about tech modernization, as we all know that we are heading towards AI, and this particular automation, and this we need to actually embrace AI right now. We need to know that this can actually help us be sustainable. Secondly, this will also support us uh, to actually understand more analytics behind the entire market. So as it is data driven, as you can already see in the slide, that it is data driven, and plus the data is the thing which actually runs the profit margins of the organization right now. If you have the data, that yes, as if I talk about Google, for example, they what do they actually want? They do not want your money directly. They want your attention, and that attention is the most important factor which actually runs the market for them, for example. And then if I talk about uh, like strategic acquisition, if, as it mentioned over here, uh, Google did it with YouTube, as you can see. So the most important thing was Ola, and for example, Ola, they acquired Food Panda, and in fact, to strengthen the delivery system, the delivery business of in India. So probably yes, at this particular stage, to be competitive, you need to have diversification in the products. You need to have expansion in the product, in the geography, as well as in the the market share. Talking about the tech, as we have already discussed, embracing AI very important, and strategic acquisitions, as we discussed about Ola and the yes. So now, if we talk about going to the next slide, talking about planning the perfect exit. Yes. Okay. As you can see, it's very beautifully made. A very pictorial. The presentation is very nice. uh, the exit strategy should be actually, there has to be very calculative, and it has to be planned very sincerely from the beginning. In fact, if I say, like, from the beginning, in sense, when you start thinking about it, you need to plan, document, and every step you need to document it, and then you actually go towards every step which has to be planned in a very sincere manner. Like for example, uh, your sustainability and your profitability actually keeps a lot of important plays a lot of important role out here in the planning for the exit. So if I talk about investors connection And Megha, I'm not able to see the thing clearly over here. Right. Yeah. Investor expectations for returns. Yeah, it's now clear. Right. Investors' expectations as per returns. Talking about investor expectations, these investors, they, as you might have already known, that if, for example, if I come as an investor, I wouldn't be looking for a longer kind of thing. I would love to exit it before, my before you plan for the exit. So in fact, over here, I need to first create a very strong presence in the market, and then I'm actually, declaring that yes, now it is the time for me to exit from the market. And why talking about the market currently? Because to command a higher market valuation, this is very important. And if you talk about IPOs and considering strategic acquisitions across the market and IPO routes, the founders should actually be mentally prepared for the exit, right? And possibly starting a new venture post that. So if you are actually thinking about acquire, getting an exit on this, particularly, you need to be very sure that what is the next path, what is the next possible steps you can talk about, right? Can we go to the next slide, please? What are the exit options? What are the exit options? If I talk about exit options, right? Uh, for example, acquisition, merger, as you can see. Yes, Instagram and Meta, you have done already. You've shown that. Yes, Zomato, and in fact, they. If I talk about management buyouts, so over there, these organizations, they have the control. The founders actually have the control on that. And secondary sales, where every early investors, the investors who've actually gone into the business earlier in the beginning of the startup, the journey of the startup, they have actually created a strong support and support system for the valuation of the company, valuation of the organization. So when you talk about management buyouts and mergers and IPOs, and talking about the mergers, Ola and Yafood Panda, I've already discussed about it, right? So if you talk about that, this strong governance has to be created against it, and then we talk about the documentation part. As I said, there has to be very very clear, and the vision has to be very clear that कि मेरे को करना क्या है, what all things I have to be talking about when I'm talking about exit. As you clearly you can see that on the slide, that these are the major options where I can exit from the exit preparation. And when I talk about exit for the investors normally come with a very clear goal, that if I'm investing, say for example, X amount of money in the particular stage, so that particular valuation would be depending on the amount of the investment, and the equity dilution will obviously depend on the valuation of the organization. So when I talk about the exit planning for the investor, I would obviously think as an investor that I have to take out a return of at least 5 to 10x out of that. Normally, the market says 5 to 10x out of the startup. So yeah, real exits and real lessons. Successful exit is not a luck. True, very true. And in fact, uh, if you talk about the successful exits, they need a lot of planning, lot of efforts to be put in for this. And in fact, if you talk about the execution of this particular thing is obviously not luck, right? So it has to be very strategically planned, and the entire focus, basically, as I said, you're talking about building legacies. You're not building startups. So when I talk about that, so I believe Zomato, for example, as you mentioned over here, proving its business model actually helped the Zomato for the IPO, and in 2021, as you clearly mentioned, because they had focused, they had proved their business, they proved their metal, and they stayed in the market. They created a sustainable ecosystem within themselves, and they, as you know, that it is a zero inventory business. So the capital which was there was strategically spent, and they knew that this is, uh, this particular IPO will actually boost their market share. Uh, so that's it from my side, I guess, Megha. So probably we covered almost everything which we wanted to cover. And I would actually like to end this thing by saying the same thing again, that the founders, you guys, should build legacies, not startups, right? And thank you guys for joining me.
Thank you so much, sir. So we have here some few questions. First is that how important is a strong team structure in building startup maturity?
Oh, that's very important. In fact, a strong team, because as I had, we had discussed about Ola's top management getting, before the expansion. So that is a very critical thing, and you need to build a team. See, this particular team, if I talk about, this has to be decided when you are actually in the seed stage. That मुझे कौन चाहिए, मुझे this whose expertise would be actually required to me. And if I talk about not just the expertise, but that the time, the ownership, the responsibility, and the entire thing depends on the entire team. See, if I talk about, if I am pitching, for example, I am an early stage startup and I'm trying to pitch myself in front of investors. The idea is that probably it can be related to product or services based organization, whatever it is. But my main issue would be over here is my team structure. The investor would directly be dealing with your team, and that particular team will decide whether the investors are actually going ahead or not, because they have the investors have an intellect to understand and capture whether this guy or that lady or that person is actually going to be a kind of a business reflection of my amount. There has to be some very clear understanding that your team structure is very, very important to for building the startup maturity.
Um, Thank you so much, sir, for clear the question. One more question. Like, how can we measure organizational maturity in financial and operational terms?
Yeah, can we go back to the slide where you had mentioned about the
Yeah,
EBITDA?
sure.
Yes, over here we've actually done this operational focus and the financial focus. If you can actually understand this, that the if I talk about well, I couldn't see the question. I'm not able to see the question.
Yes.
Yeah. How can we measure operational maturity in financial and operational? This is the way you are going to actually measure the operational focus on maturity and financial terms. And basically, I've just stated, they've taken a note on this, that uh, you need to assess your profitability first of all, that you are right now that self-sufficient and sustainable in the market, and that particular profit margin which you achieved. Obviously, in the beginning, you will be having, the gross margins would be very less, the profit margins would be less because you're in the expansion phase. Once you reach the maturity, your profit margins will automatically have a sensible margin. So when you talk about that, and the return on equity, first of all, another thing which is really important, the return on equity will actually show the efficiency of using your shareholder capital, right? There are a lot of shareholders in your organization. You diluted the organization for approximately 5, 6 investors, and that particular return on your equity will actually show the efficiency of using that capital which you've been invested on. So this is one very important. And operational terms, if I say, yes, talking about you have attained a market share as you had might have understood and analyzed in the beginning of your ideation at the ideation stage, while pitching to the investors that this is my serviceable market, this is my targeted achievable market. You achieve that kind of share and you're satisfied with that. That would be a stage where you will start planning for the exit. That will be the day when you start planning that, yes, I'm getting into the maturity stage, and this is what I had planned, and my financial projections for 5, 10 years, whatever you have achieved. This is the stage where I start planning for maturity, right? Any other questions on that?
No, sir, no further question. Thank you so much for such an insightful and thoughtful session. Your perspectives on scaling sustainably, planning strategic exit, and building long-term value have truly enriched our understanding of what it takes to grow a successful startup. On behalf of Gene Cube and everyone here today, we deeply appreciate the time, knowledge, and experience you have shared with us. So, and to all over wonderful participants, thank you for being part of today's session. Stay tuned and join us again for more engaging and discussion as we continue to empower innovators and entrepreneurs at GMQ. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.